Welcome back to Food Chain. My name is Prince Apia. Today we'll be speaking to Engineer Professor Nicholas Che Bafo, who is an engineer with expertise in soil and water. We'll be speaking to him on the importance of water to crop production. Thank you very much for joining us on Food Chain, sir.
Thank you.
So, sir, to begin with, what would you say is the importance of water to crop production?
Thank you. In general, when it comes to crop production, a lot of factors come into play, including the seed, the resources, the land, and so on. But for most people, they will tell you the most important factor in crop production is water. Because without water to the crop will not be able to thrive, will not be able to grow and produce what you want. Because for the farmer, essentially, it is the produce from the crop that will be able to pay for your cost. So without water, essentially, what is going to happen is the growth of the crop will be stunted. And then in the end, you'll not be able to produce the various crops that you desire. I'm saying that because when you even apply fertilizer to the crop, you need the water to dissolve it before the roots of the crop can absorb it. In a fertilizer in its solid form, some of them, when they come into contact with water, do generate heat. So if you don't dissolve it in water, it will rather burn the crop. So you don't put it that close to the crop. If you did that, it will kill your crop. And then naturally, there are some nutrients in the soils. People call it macronutrients, micronutrients. We know the NPK or NPK fertilizer that we apply to the crop. You need the water to dissolve these things. And then you need the tension of the water to be right. As the soil dries up, it becomes more and more difficult for the root of the crop to take the water so that it can produce the food that it needs. Basically, this is what I would say.
Okay. We know that there's a dry season.
Yes.
And then there's the rainy season. At every season, what will be the ideal level of water a farmer should require in cultivating his or her crop?
Actually, it is a very complex question. The amount of water that a crop can take from the soil is a factor dependent on the depth of the rooting system. But it also has to do with the canopy, the leaves, and the way it can take out water from the crop. So there are particular crops. You take sugarcane, it may need a depth of water of say 1,200, 1,900 millimeters. But other crops like groundnut may need far less, say about 300 millimeters for the growing season. So it depends on the crop. Various crops demand a lot more water, others demand less, but it's dependent on the rooting depth and then the canopy, as I said. So a crop like groundnut will not be deeper than, in the old system, they said 1 foot, about 30 centimeters. Whereas maize can have an effective rooting depth of about 1.2 meters or about 4 feet. So
for a crop like a plantain, for instance, how much water does it need to yield better?
I don't have it from the top of my head, but it could be as much about 800 millimeters, yes.
With this said, the issue about climate change and the critical use of water to help the crop produce the kind of yield expected. Now farmers are complaining a lot about the undulating nature and the uneven distribution of water in recent times. What would be your advice?
Well, we know the pattern of our rainfall. Like you are in Kumasi, the expectation is that it will start raining from about March, and then by the middle of July, about, you see the rains will go down. That's what we call the minor dry season. Then it will pick up again. And then by about October, November, should come to an end, and then there will be a dry season. If you were up north, that would be a bit different because we have two rainfall seasons down south. And up north, the rainfall season is only one. But you threw in the issue of climate change. Studies are suggesting that the average rainfall, say Kumasi, you expect to have in a year about 1,350 millimeters. That average rainfall is not changing, but the pattern we have known over the years seem to be changing. So if that is the case, then we must liaise. We have a crop research institute that has been able to develop various crops that can cope with some of these things. So we have to get the right seeds that can do well in some of these periods. And then the traditional rain-fed agriculture, which people refer to as the grace of God agriculture, we have to change it. And how can we change it? Essentially through irrigation. Irrigation does not necessarily mean impounding large amounts of water to be used. You can get water from boreholes. You can block rivers and pump to your crop. We can use greenhouse, where we know some greenhouses, even at KNUST campus, we know the president commissioned some of these things. These are things that we can do. There are other forms. There are things like hydroponics. That one, you don't even need the soil. We know all the nutrients various crops we need, especially vegetables. So you put that into water. Then you can put it on sand or even sawdust, vermiculite, inert material. And then you apply the water gradually, and so you can produce your crops. So in some cities, they have these things because the market for vegetables, they are readily available. So we can do that and produce a lot of vegetables, tomatoes, cucumber, all those vegetables. And this is because of healthy eating. People are very much interested in those things. And there is also another field called Aeroponics. So there, you grow the plant like yams and others, then you apply intermittent water as an aerosol spray to the root system from time to time. And I know we did some work with some lady at the Cross Research Institute. They are able, instead of cutting the head of yam to plant, to give you another yam in a mound, you cut the vines at 1 or 2 notes, and then you apply the aeroponics, and then you can produce a lot of yam seedlings. People like something like pona. So then you can grow some of these things for the export market. So we are saying that we can apply technology, we can apply irrigation, but it shouldn't be large-scale irrigation. So we can do a lot of things.
Yeah. So what has been your observation? You've been in this field for a long time. What has been your observation in how farmers treat their crop yields in relation to the water that their crop needs?
What I have seen over the years is that the extension service, they have a lot of work to do because you teach farmers about some of these things, what they should do. And people will tell you that the resource poor farmer, they don't like to take risks. So irrespective of what you teach them, they prefer to do what they know best, so that at least they will get the little that they regularly get from it. But the way things are changing, we have to change. And people have taught farmers over the years, planting in lines, you ensure that the intensity of crops on the land, you get it right. It's not a pattern of putting one here, there, haphazardly. What you can get the right number of crops per unit area of land, and you get all the facilities, including water, then your yield can go up. People get, say, 1.5 bags per acre, 3 bags per acre. But according to the Crops Research Institute, some of the things they have produced, you can get as much as 18 bags, 24 bags. So farmers should come around, and it's a question for radio stations and the extension service to be able to educate farmers and people. And we want people who are educated also to go into crop production, so that some of these technologies will be used. Because you don't need too much land. Because if you are getting 1.5 bags, 3 bags per acre, then to get about 15 bags, you have to do about 10 acres. Meanwhile, if you do 1 acre, and all these things are available, fertilizers and others, you can make 18, 24 bags.
So we are still here with Engineer Professor Nicholas J. Balfour. He is an engineer with expertise in soil and water engineering. Prof, we realize that in recent weeks, the rains are coming in very hard. Some farmers have begun struggling to contain it. How do they find a way out in a situation like that in recent times?
Thank you very much. The issue with rain is that when it rains, the soil is like a sponge. It soaks it, and then it's stored in the root zone. Some will go beyond that and it's stored in the ground. Actually, there's more water underground. And that's why you can exploit it in terms of boreholes for use. But the thing with flooding is that whenever it floods, you see rings around trees where the water comes to, because the debris will be lifted. And then you see rings around trees. If it is buildings, there will be a water line where the floods get to. So in the dry season, when the ground gets dry, you might be tempted to think that those lands, you can go and crop there. But if you are not careful, you know that it's constantly flooding. So in some countries, what they do is they do land use zoning. So the areas that are prone to flooding, you don't go and build there. Of course, you can crop, but if you want to crop, you have to create drainage channels and others to be able to take the excess water away. Because most crops, like my favorite food is plantain, it cannot survive flooding for about 2-3 days. It will just die off. Others are okay. They can cope with flooding because of their physiology. In simple terms, that's the way God made those crops. Some can survive, but those that can survive flooding, you don't have to get into the valleys. So traditionally, people left some distance from the riverbeds, but it seems scarcity of land, population, people are moving more and more into the valleys. But if you want to do that, then you must be prepared for some of the unfavorable effects. So if we had the resources, we can engineer the valleys, have big drains. I mean, you go to Holland and others. They've been able to do that. They've been able to push back the sea, so they take some land from the sea, but it costs a lot of money. You have to tax the population to get the resources to be able to engineer rivers. So some of those things, our people, when you go there, they know areas that are prone to flooding. I think my advice is they will stay away from those areas. But if they still want to do that, then in some years you'll be fine. But other years, the flooding will come and you have to pay for that.
Oh, so for a crop like plantain, your favorite,
Yes.
and if a farmer is cultivating plantain on a bare land, not in a valley, in a street land, for lack of a better word, and the rains are coming in very hard. We visited a farmer, for instance, and he was struggling in that particular situation. For someone like that, how does he manage the rains that are coming and ensure that he doesn't lose his crop yield and the land in entirety?
If you have a lot of water coming to your field, you can create a ridge at the top end of your field, so that excess water coming into your field, the ridge will act as a barrier. Okay. And then you direct it to the low-lying area, away from your field. Okay. On the other hand, if water is flooding from the stream onto your field, again, you can do a ridge. But the most important thing is a parallel to the river. Stay away from too close to the river, because some of these ideas that we are talking about, they could be expensive for an ordinary farmer. So it's better you stay away. But if that's the only land you have, then maybe you can do ridges parallel to the stream, very high ones. These days you can use the tractor. It has plows that are looking opposite to each other. We call that the ridger. So you can use that to create some of these ridges to block it at a very high ground. But don't go too close to the stream, because water has a mind of its own. If you build in a water area, you think you have a wall and those things. Once the level rises, it will push everything away.
Before you talk about technologies that are available and technologies that farmers can also employ, or even the state can employ to help farmers with the issue of water on their farms and all that, let's talk about these three: water, the type of soil, fertilizer application, and the crop. What is the constitutes of water and its importance in the kind of yield that one gets on the land? First, let's say for tubers, for instance.
Yes, in general, our soils have nutrients. It's from the way they have been made, from the rocks from which they were made. The nutrients are there. But the moment you produce crops, the crops literally absorb these nutrients. So if it is yam, to create your tuber, cassava, plantain, and so on and so forth, they take nutrients from the soil. So it keeps depleting. And to overcome that, that is why you apply for the fertilizers to the soil, if you like, to restore the fertility of the soil. So for every crop, the experts in the crops that I've told you about, crops researchers, crop scientists, every crop, they will tell you how much fertilizer should be used at what stage. Normally, it tends to be NPK fertilizer. And then when it is flowering, the plant is flowering, then you put in the sulfate of ammonia just to help flowering. But normally, when the plant does not get enough water, especially at the flowering stage, then something like maize, you remove the husk and you see that there are no seeds. Yeah. So So those points are very critical moments in the production process, which you need water. And like I've said, people use watering cans to pick water from the stream and water. Others use simple pumps that may not cost too much. So these are things that we have to begin to procure as farmers. That is your business. So anything that will impact on the business such that you'll not be able to produce enough, you have to work out on that.
So we visited a farmer who had decided to use these water bottles.
Yes.
So he fills the water, punches a hole in the plastic bottle, and then keeps it close to
the plant.
Turn it upside down, and it leaks gradually over a period to help the farmer.
It's a form of irrigation as well. Yes. Others have porous pots, those pots that we are using for cooling our water. They call them coolers. It's because of the leaking process of the water out of it. And when wind blows over, it cools. So you can bury some of these things also in the ground, pour water, and then it will leak for you to produce your crops. Others use bamboo. They cut the roots, pour water in it, bury this and pour water, make a slit, and then it will go to your crops. So there are all sort of, if I want to say, contrivances that you can make to make water available to the crop. So once you do that, then you plant it, and then every year you don't need to come back and put the same things there. Colleagues, we did something where you have a tank, then you have pipes over your land, and then the planting distances, you make some small slits at those points. So the water will flow through that, and then you plant your crops at those distances. And the PVC pipes, very small ones, that can serve the purpose. It's the same irrigation.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the technologies. You've been doing a lot of research. What are some of the research technologies you think farmers must come, into contact with you to help employ on their farms to increase their yields in relation to water and the kind of soil they use?
You happen to find yourself in such an area where there is a national irrigation project and you want to be part of it, you can go and talk to them. But if you don't have it and you are a farmer, there's a stream. You can also use boreholes. You can use open wells. And we've talked about, there are also technologies that allow you the water to stay in the ground for longer. Mulching. Mulching is basically when you cut the weed, don't throw it away, don't burn it, cover the soil with it. Then the sun's energy will not be burning the soil like that. So the water will stay in there for a longer period. There are people in pineapple production, they cover most of the ground with the plastic sheeting. And then the point where the plant is grown is perforated to allow it to grow. And then that will keep the water there for a while. But in general, for any production that you want to do, you can talk to experts. They will look at it and advise accordingly.
I said, do we have enough irrigation facilities in the country, national irrigation facilities?
I wouldn't say so, because it's a very expensive thing. But there are also simple technologies that you can apply. But I think a lot more irrigation is being added. But it's quite expensive. So, and we can't wait for irrigation to be provided at every level before we go on with water. We have streams. Some of the streams, they don't dry up during the dry season. We say they are perennial streams. When you have that, you can use it. We can also construct simple dams. There are things that you do that you need permission from the Water Resources Commission. You have to take permission and do it so that we can produce all year round. We don't have to, if your job is basically agriculture, And in the dry season, you don't have the irrigation facilities. What we are saying is that during that period, there's nothing to do. You have to find alternative work. Some people will say that the devil finds work for idle hands. If I'm a farmer and in the dry season I can't do the job I do, then that is very difficult. So if we want to farm all year round, irrigation is a key thing.
So what do you say to those who had so much confidence in government's one district, one dam initiative that hasn't lived up to expectation?
Well, I wouldn't say that it hasn't lived up to expectation. They will have to look at it and then see how well they can construct some of the. Like I said, it's a very expensive thing that the state is trying to do. I hope they succeed in this effort. They have done some, and they should keep at it. And gradually, over time, we'll overcome this limitation on agriculture, that is water.
Anything you want to add finally, or be your advice to the state, for instance? I mentioned the one district, one dam. It's something that a lot of farmers, a lot of stakeholders have talked about so much. What will be your advice on how to go about it effectively?
I would say that the expertise is available. So for every small dam that we want to do, let us do the feasibility study very well, so that we don't end up with a situation where you construct the dam, people expect that they will have water, and then at some point it dries up. That would be too bad. So some of those things is basically the feasibility study. So you look at all the available data and then you prefer the right solutions, which must be religiously adhered to. And as we do them, we do the dams, we have to monitor and evaluate them and see what can be done to keep improving the system. We don't need to be importing tomatoes and things like that. Once we have the water, our people can produce enough for us and even export. And also that can dovetail into industry. Thank you.
Well, apart from that, any other advice with relations to water and improvement and our crop production that you want to add finally?
In general, we are saying that when it comes to agriculture, some people will say that water is the main thing. So anything that we can do to improve our water resources so that we can get water available for farmers, we should do that. And one thing that worries me a lot is the horizontal development of accommodation for people. As a consequence of that, a lot of lands, a lot of people that depended on agriculture are being pushed away from our big cities and what have you. I think we have to look again at our land policy so that land will be available. We talked about flooding. I think when we build houses, we should ensure that at least we leave some spaces, green spaces, to allow water to soak into the ground. Once you keep concreting roads, concreting buildings, doing that, water cannot soak into the ground. Then we'll have a lot more flooding, which will be a problem for everybody. I think that's my advice.
So we've been speaking to Engineer Professor Nicholas J. Balfour, who is an expert in water and soil engineering. And he is the Dean of the Graduate Studies here at K University as well. We've been speaking a lot about the importance of water to crop production, also about what the state can do to help with irrigation and some of the policies with regards to land and water in the country. My name is Prince Apia. I hope you enjoyed the discussion on the importance of water to crop production. Thank you for joining us on Food Chain.